Malcolm Edwards. I was a bombardier on the B-26 Nix Chick in the 344th Bomb Group, 495th Squadron. The following is the recollections that I have of D-Day, and taken from memory and from some notes that I kept. D-Day was my 22nd mission. We were confined to the post for a week ahead, but didn't think too much of it because this had happened before. But the night before, we realized from some things that were happening, such as the planes down on the flight line being painted with large black and white stripes, that this was probably going to be it. All the crews in our squadron got up about 12:30. We ate breakfast about 0100, and at 0200 we went to briefing. When we got into briefing, the colonel told us that this was the invasion and that we were to knock out 3 coastal guns on the east side of Cherbourg. As we understood then, the Americans were landed at Cherbourg and the British on up the beach at Caen. We took off in the dark. We flew number 2 position in the second flight and carried a D8 bomb sight. This was to have been my first lead mission if we bombed below 4,000 feet. They told us we were to bomb no matter what, and as the weather was bad, if we bombed under 4,000 feet, I was to lead and bomb with a D8 sight. If we bombed above 4,000 feet, the lead ship was going to use the Norden. Well, it turned out we could see well enough, and he did use the Norden sight. When we went across the channel, the number of ships that we saw were just, there's just no way to describe them. As far as you could see, there were ships. As we got closer to the coast, we could see large warships of some kind shelling the French coast. And there were so many of them doing it that it looked like there were fireflies in a big field, just a constant sparkle down there as the big guns went off. We were to bomb the coastal battery at 20 minutes before the troops hit, so we went across right at the height of the barrage that was hitting the French coast. You could see many invasion craft, landing craft, it's circling to wait until it was the right time to head in. And as we passed on across, we saw the landing barges start in towards the beach, covered at very close cover by P-38s. But we saw an awful lot of Allied planes. The sky was full of 38s and 51s and seemed like mostly P-47s. We were told the night before that a lot of paratroopers went in, and we had heard planes going over constantly all night. Of course, that was not uncommon, but this time the volume of them and the length of time we could hear them going over was unusual. Anyway, we went in at 5,000 feet. Most of the bombs hit the target. You could see numerous guns on the shore returning the fire of our fleet. The light flak was very intense, but we didn't get much heavy flak. And after we turned off the target, one ship did explode and go down and explode in the air. On the way back across the channel, we turned the radio into civilian channels to listen in, and no one other than the military knew that this was the invasion, and the radio stations in England didn't know it. And it was sort of strange to be up there with this tremendous thing happening, and none of the civilians knew about it. On the way out, we crossed over what I was told were the Isle of Guernsey and Jersey, and there was some kind of warship shelling those islands, which had been taken over by the Germans. Anyway, we made it back with the loss of just one ship, and this was the first time that I had ever been on a mission when we bombed under 11,000 feet. Another mission that we were on that may be of interest was on June 29th, we went to Rouen. I don't know French, but it's R-O-U-E-N. We were leading the high flight, and as we went on towards the target, the clouds kept getting lower and lower, and I was frantically trying to change my bombing data. And we actually got in there. The clouds were almost down on the target, and at about that time, we had the middle ship in our flight exploded and blew us out of formation. The only time I remember getting completely out of formation like that, and everybody turned and headed back home. we were hit pretty hard, but the plane was, but both engines were functioning, and we were able to keep on. We ran into a very rough thunderstorm, got tossed around, and as we came out of it, we started across the channel and started right over a convoy of ships with some big, tremendous big ships in there. It looked like one of them looked like a battleship, and they started shooting at us. So we turned and made back for the coast of France there. This particular fighter strip was a squadron of Canadians, and Wing Commander Johnny Johnson, who was the highest scoring, I know, English ace, I think maybe Allied ace, but he was the commanding officer. And we landed there, and shortly after, he came back from a mission and had gotten his 32nd victory that day, and he did a slow roll in his Spitfire down the length of the runway, which was quite a sight. We enjoyed our stay there. They treated us good, and I got a Mauser rifle and a bunch of ammunition for it and a German helmet, and got to see a lot of the German fortifications. We took off the next morning. One thing happened. We still had our bombs because we hadn't been able to drop them the night before. The plane was sitting plumb across the runway, like maybe a quarter of a mile away, and when we got ready to leave that morning, Nick said, "Malcolm," said, "you go out there and salvo those bombs." Well, being the bombardier, of course, it was my job, and I really didn't, I knew from knowing about the pins in them and that they weren't armed, that there was no danger in salvoing them, but it's still sort of lonesome to go out there and open the bomb bay doors and drop the bombs out. But anyway, we took off that day shortly after that happened and got back to the base, and they didn't know where we were. We were, as far as the group was concerned, we were missing.
West Sherman Avenue, Nampa, Idaho. I was born June the 30th, 1917 at Traer, Iowa. However, I was raised on a large farm or cattle ranch in eastern Kansas. I entered the service in 1941 as one of the first draftees from my area. I trained as an Army infantryman at Camp Roberts, then Camp San Luis Obispo in California. With the start of the war, I volunteered for aviation cadet training and completed bombardier training at Kirtland Army Air Base, Albuquerque, New Mexico, in early 1943. I then trained at MacDill Field and Lakeland in Florida in a Martin B-26 unit. In March 1944, I went to England on a former Italian luxury liner with the 397th Bombardment Group, as I had been hospitalized at Savannah, Georgia for jaundice following yellow fever shots. In England, I rejoined my unit, the 494th Squadron of the 344th Bomb Group. Within a few days, I was flying as bombardier. My first mission was about April the 13th, and on my fourth or fifth mission, I was the lead bombardier for a box of 18 aircraft. The results were excellent in heavy flak. However, no one in the box was injured, although a number of aircraft were damaged. D-Day was about my 20th mission, and I was in the deputy lead for the group. Our group was leading all the 9th Air Force bombers striking the beaches. The navigator, Carl Moore of Michigan, now of San Antonio, Texas, and I were briefed by the group commander, Colonel Vance, the previous day. The briefing had included only the lead pilots, navigators, and bombardiers. Following the briefing, Colonel Vance assigned everyone into teams of 2 who had to be together wherever they went until the mission was flown. We were also restricted to the airfield. I was a second lieutenant. The pilot was Thomas Johnson, a captain. The co-pilot and navigator were also second lieutenants. We had 4 officers and 3 enlisted gunners on the flight. Now I'm going to rely basically on a journal that Carl Moore and I kept on some missions. It's most interesting. We prepared notes of most missions together as we were very close in those days, and we even keep contact at this time. The notes start out. About 2200 that night, a briefing was called for 0200 the following morning. Many suspected and a very few knew that this was it. We got up at 12:30 and were trying in vain to get a little sleep and ate breakfast. Fried eggs, sausage, pancakes, and coffee. Now, as I recall, fried eggs were a rarity, as fresh eggs were rationed 2 to the week. Everyone was there. You might say the group hardly went to bed at all. Those who were not on the loading list were up to see what was going on. Everyone had one eye on the sky as they walked to the mess hall and then to the briefing room. It was a full moon doing its best to peek through a layer of cumulus at about 6,000 feet. Those of us who knew this was the big day, and most of the men guessed it was, knew also that there would be no red recall procedure that day. We would go come clouds or fair weather. We sat around the mess hall having an extra cup of coffee and saying a silent prayer that the weather would break. About 1:40 we went to the briefing room. MPs had the place well guarded, and we were checked in one by one at the door. The briefing room was full as the group was putting up 54 airplanes on this mission. Throughout the room, war correspondents were casually taking a few notes and visiting with the crews who were to fly, and in general, getting their story together. The map with the route on the mission was still covered, and when the screen was lifted, everyone was watching. As Colonel Whitty started to brief us, it slowly dawned on us that this was really the big thing, and we were at the head of the line. Colonel Vance read a letter from General Eisenhower, Burton, and Anderson, commending us on our past record and challenged us to do even better. Some of the men had been there nearly a year waiting for this, and here it was. Just before going out to the ships, instructions were given for bombing at all altitudes. We were to go in at 10,800 if possible, but we would go as low as necessary. Out at the ship, everything was ready. The gunners had not been briefed, and we were not to tell them where we were going until we were leaving the coast of England. We checked all our equipment and stood around silently cursing the weather. It had socked in solid. The sky was full of fighters, and the roar of engines was steady. Just as we started engines, it started to rain. Boy, I thought we had it. A join up in weather like this, and at night, instructions were given for using Plan B, which would mean 5,000 feet or lower. But the war must go on. And at the appointed minute, we rolled into the runway and roared off into the air. By some miracle, we joined on our box and went on course on time. The clouds broke up some, and we climbed on top to 10,800. It was pretty up here, with the fleecy white clouds below and the bright moonlight above. We could hear someone calling parade, and it was Norgard trying to get permission to bomb from 10,000 feet. No dice. So down we went again to 3,000 feet in the rain and clouds. It was starting to get daylight, and we could see the ground. The G-box was working, and Carl stayed with it. We told the gunners where we were going and what the show was all about. We had about 3 minutes to kill and circled around splasher number 11 for some time and went on course on time, leaving the coast at 05:45. We put on our flak suits and got ready for anything. The sea below was literally covered with landing barges. The full moon was setting in the west. It was a delicate pink and looked twice as big as usual. To say we were scared would be a gross understatement. We were going at 6,000 feet, and we knew they might shoot the hell out of us with everything from rifles to 105s. Soon we could see the flashes of the naval guns in the distance, lobbing shells into the coast. The landing barges were coming in, and the air was full of planes of all kinds. This was it. As we neared the enemy coast, we kept wondering when it would come. Surely they would shoot at us. As we approached the coast and skirted the point, we could make out the naval vessels and the guns on the shore firing tracers and rocket shells. It seemed that every minute they would start in on us. Our target was right on the beach, and we paralleled the beach on the bomb run. Bomb bay doors were open now, and we were on the run. It seemed an eternity, but only a minute or less, and bombs were away. Now, I distinctly remember setting the bomb sight for 5,320 feet. I was deputy lead, as I said, to the first bombers in and constantly adjusting my disk speed and trail setting for our many changes in altitude. I finally released on the leader. We were carrying 8 500-pound GP bombs. We'll be back to my notes. Our gunners were cutting loose at most anything they could see. Tracers could be seen going in all directions. I think some of our bullets came closer to us than Jerry's. We saw 3 109s, but they didn't bother us. One I recall is a red Messerschmitt 109. Our bombs hit on the beach and near the target area. We turned left over the secondary target and then tried to climb up and right to go on top to get home. We ran into icing and had to go down. To the right and left we could see rocket guns shooting at someone. We kept expecting them to hit us next. We turned right and across the peninsula and out by the Isle of Guernsey. That's the end of the notes I have of that day. I was a captain at the end of the war, and I remained on active duty until 1969, retiring as a colonel. My last assignment was as a Minuteman Missile Squadron commander at Great Falls, Montana. This is George Eldridge of Nampa, Idaho. That'll be the end for tonight.
Tony Paulino of the 497 Squadron of the 344th Bomb Group, trying to relive the accounts of the events on D-Day. If my recollection is correct, the mission in which McCamey ship was lost occurred on the second mission of that day. The first mission being one directly over Omaha Beach, and as I recall at that time, I don't believe anyone in the squadron suffered fatal losses or damages, although most airplanes did sustain some hits. Now, with regards to the second mission, the one in which I saw McCamey's ship go down, he was flying off to our right in the third box, as illustrated in the diagram. And when he sustained the hits, he dropped down out of the formation and banked to the left as if trying to break landfall to get back over the North Sea. In the report, it says that I indicated, I beg your pardon, he made an attempt to get back over the channel. We were well south of the North Sea. And I don't know why I said in my interrogation report that they were drifting back towards the North Sea. From my position in the top turret, I was able to see most of the activities going on about us, and oftentimes had been called to the interrogation room to give my accounts on several missions as to what I saw happening on various raids. It got to a point where I couldn't remember if some of the events that I reported were some that happened even in my dreams, because when thinking back over all these years, I recall being questioned about a particular raid and a particular incident, and when asked by the interrogating officer if I were sure that I saw what I had seen and could verify it, I had to mention to him that in the heat of the battle, with flak bouncing all around us, that sometimes you really aren't that sharp just to really be very accurate about what you report. However, with respect to the incident on the occasion that Lieutenant McAmee was lost, I definitely recall that incident. He did pass beneath the formation and slowly banked to the left, and I did visually see large, heavy damage to his right engine, which was on fire, and it appeared to be over inside the root section, clear into the bomb bay. He maintained the ship reasonably level for a long enough period of time for 3 parachutes to appear. I can only assume, and it's only an assumption, that they were from the rear of the airplane, and the gunners were able to get out because he maintained the airplane at a level enough attitude that they could do so. However, I am thoroughly convinced that no one from the front section, the pilot, the co-pilot, or bombardier, was able to get out of that ship before it blew up, and the ship disappeared in a large black puff. There wasn't anything left of the ship except a black cloud that appeared like a giant flak burst. So in my opinion, trying to recall this incident some 47 years later, I can't see any possibility that anybody in the front section of the airplane could have survived that explosion. With respect to the 3 parachutes, as I recalled, informed the interrogating officer, I saw 3 parachutes and they drifted back towards the English Channel, and at the time there was heavy ground fire, light caliber, heavy ground fire, intermixed with a lot of tracer ammunition. So I have to assume that it came from artillery pieces and tank fire, but that's only a guess. And I swear that after all these years, I recall one of the individuals bailing out actually waved to us as he drifted back away from the formation. And that, I can assure you, actually happened. Who that individual was, I can't tell. But if it's, in my opinion, I think it was Finn, because he was one hell of a nutty guy, and he was a hot shot, always up on, always jittery, always wired. And if anybody was going to wave back at us after being parachuted out of that airplane, it would be him. And I personally think that McAmee, and I keep stumbling over his name because it hurts me to think that we lost those men. I think he should have deserved a commendation of some kind, because he actually removed that airplane from the formation knowing full well that he had an airplane that was severely damaged and was in danger of blowing up, and thereby saving the balance of the formation. So once again, in my opinion, no one in that ship, pilot, co-pilot, bombardier, would have had time to bail out, and they were lost when the ship blew up. And I can see by your report that the 3 gunners are listed as KIA. that was something I was never aware of rather, because we were not given a report as to what happened to them. I can't believe that they had actually landed on the ground without being killed by the ground fire. It was intense. We were at a reasonably low altitude. The chances of them surviving through that barrage would have been very, very slim. And but I can't be for sure because I only watched them drift for a short period of time when our attention was directed to the mission, and the bomb bays were opening and we were on our IP. And I just could not spend any more time looking back at them. So as to what happened to them, I was surprised to learn they did not survive the jump and are listed as KIA. I finished up my missions on a raid to Akron, in which I sandbagged because my regular crew, Captain Stallhut's crew, had probably finished up a little before me because I had taken a flak leave to Paris. And when I came back from Paris, I needed one more mission to complete my tour, and I sandbagged with a Lieutenant Stahl, S-T-A-H-L, on a raid to Akron, Germany. The raid was successful. The ship wasn't damaged in any way, and we got back to the base, and I thanked Lieutenant Stahl for the ride and reported to the OD that the Surgeon General, I beg your pardon, I reported to the surgeon, flight surgeon, that I had completed my 65 so he could arrange for a physical prior to making arrangements for me to be shipped back to the United States. All in all, my experience with the men of the 344th and of the 497 Squadron, in particular, my pilot, Lieutenant M.O. Stallhut, my co-pilot, Bobby Sellers, our first bombardier, Bob Merriman, was severely wounded on our very first raid to Imogen, that reprisal raid that all the groups did in reprisal to the losses of the 322nd had on their initial raids at low level. My engineer gunner, Clayton Haskell, whom I keep in touch with. My radio man, Joe Lovitz, who I haven't heard of since we got discharged. And I can only say it was a pleasure and it was an honor to fly and serve with these men. And in particular, Colonel Delwyn Bentley, the flying cowboy. I have a picture of him up on his ship with his cowboy boots. I consider the man one of the most skilled pilots and leaders in the whole 9th Air Force. He is one remarkable man, and of the caliber of man that can lead men, hold them together, and get them safely through some of the roughest missions ever flown in the ETO. Now, with respect to that tape that I will send along to the University of New Orleans, Carl, I will make this tape for you and send it to you, and then you can have that as an additional record of this kid, 19 years old, coming from abject poverty in a Little Italy section of Philadelphia, who flew in one of the greatest wars this country will ever know. And I will give the director, an account of who I was, where I came from, and the experience that I had during that vital part of our country's history. Because I always loved to fly and always was interested in airplanes, to me it was an adventure, one that will live with me the rest of my life, and one that I will try to put down on tape for the library. As I said, I will attempt to make another tape of my history and my time in the 9th and send it off to you, and then you indicate you'll send me a typed transcript of the tape. I would appreciate that. Well, for now, that's it. That's as clear as I can remember the mission. One, if you've ever met this guy Finn, and I'm pretty sure that was him, he would be a character that you could not forget, and it's unfortunate that it didn't work out for him. So for now, I'll say goodbye. I'll try to be more accurate and more specific when I make the historical tape of my experience in the 9th and send it off to you. Thank you very much. I'd like to hear from you whenever you get a chance. And as I indicated in my letter, I write to everyone on our squadron mailing list, and I've heard from several and expecting to hear from several more. I have also sent audio tapes to 1 or 2 of the men from the squadron, and they in turn sent me one back. It's a very nice way to communicate, and we can relive our histories, our experiences once again. So for now, goodbye. I hope this tape helps you put to rest what happened to Mac and me's ship, and I hope that those men rest in peace. Thank you very much.